All right, let's kick things off with a little thought experiment. Imagine you're in charge of a massive 50-story skyscraper. Now, how in the world do you find one tiny little crack way up near the top? It sounds almost impossible, right? Well, today, we're going to dive into how a piece of high-flying tech is completely shaking up the very grounded, very old-school world of property management.
No, seriously, think about it for a second. How would you actually go about doing that? It's a huge, huge challenge. And for the longest time, the answer, well, it involved a whole lot of risk.
Yep, exactly. For decades, the only way was to have teams of people literally dangling from ropes hundreds of feet in the air. You'd have all this expensive scaffolding, massive cranes, and the whole process was painfully slow, incredibly dangerous, and, you guessed it, cost an absolute fortune. You just knew there had to be a better way.
So, to really appreciate just how big of a game changer this new technology is, we first have to understand the view from the ground floor. What were the real day-to-day problems property managers were up against?
I mean, look at this list. It pretty much sums up a system that was just full of friction. You're talking about everything being done by hand. Inspections could drag on for days, sometimes even weeks. You had folks with clipboards, jotting down notes that were totally subjective. And the worst part? Some areas, like a really steep roof or the top of a facade, were basically impossible to get a good look at. They were just blind spots. And this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. We're not just talking about something being inefficient or slow. This was genuinely dangerous. You were literally putting people's lives at risk just to check on the state of a building. That's a pretty high price to pay.
Okay, so with all these problems stacking up, you can tell the industry was just desperate for a better solution. And that solution, well, it literally came from the sky. A new tool was about to take flight.
And here it is, the drone, or if you want to get technical, the unmanned aerial vehicle or UAV. Now, this isn't just some toy or a flying camera for vacation photos. In this world, it's a specialized assessment tool. It's incredibly fast, way cheaper than renting a crane, and, this is the big one, it keeps the inspection crew safely on the ground.
And this is really the core of it right here. The whole point isn't just to fly around and snap a bunch of pretty pictures. A single drone flight can generate thousands of images. The real magic, the real value, is turning all that raw data into what we call actionable intelligence. It's about creating a report that tells the property manager, hey, here's a problem, here's exactly where it is, and here's what you should probably do about it. All right, so let's really dig in. Let's look at those big industry pain points we talked about and see exactly how this technology tackles them one by one. First on the list, and honestly the most important one, danger. The human risk. How do you check the top of a roof or a high-rise without putting somebody in harm's way? Well, the drone basically becomes the inspector's eyes in the sky. It can fly right up to any potential problem spot, getting a super close look, all while the operator is standing safely on the ground. Just like that, the risk of falling from a height is completely taken out of the equation. It's gone. Okay, next up, the classic duo of time and money. The old way of doing inspections just burned through both. You needed big teams, you needed to rent all this expensive gear, and it would just wreck your budget and your schedule.
Wow. I mean, this timeline really says it all, doesn't it? Something that used to take days or even weeks of coordinating people and equipment can now be done in just a few hours. That's not a small tweak. That is a fundamental change in how fast you can operate.
So what about the data itself? How good was the information you were getting? Well, for years, property records were basically a bunch of handwritten notes and maybe a few grainy photos taken from the ground. It was often incomplete and totally open to interpretation.
And here's the huge shift. We go from subjective to objective. You're no longer relying on someone's note that says, looks like there might be a crack on the north corner. Instead, you have a crystal clear, high-resolution, time-stamped photo that shows the exact location and even the size of that crack. It's undeniable proof. It creates a perfect visual timeline for the property. And this objective data is so much more than just simple photos. It's incredibly powerful. You can create these things called orthomosaics, which are like giant detailed maps stitched together from hundreds of pictures. You can build full 3D models of the property that you can spin around and look at from any angle. And you can even use thermal imaging to see things the naked eye would miss, like hidden moisture behind a wall or an electrical system that's overheating.
And the last big pain point is just a matter of physics. There are some places that are just impossible for a person to get to. It doesn't matter how skilled your inspector is or how tall their ladder is. Some spots are simply out of reach.
But a drone? It has no such limits. It can hover and get a perfect, up-close view of every single shingle on a steep roof, every inch of a towering facade. It means you get a truly complete inspection. Suddenly, no part of your building is a blind spot anymore. The mystery is gone.
So, when you add all of this up, you realize it's about way more than just a cool new gadget. This is a fundamental shift in the whole philosophy of managing a property. It's about moving into a future that is proactive.
And this right here is the whole ballgame. The old way was reactive. You'd wait for a problem to pop up. A tenant calls about a leak. And then you'd have to scramble to make an expensive emergency repair. The new way is proactive. You use regular drone surveys to spot the tiny issue, that little hairline crack, long before it turns into a massive, costly disaster. In the long run, this actually helps extend the life of the entire asset.
It really boils down to a brand new workflow. And it's a simple but incredibly powerful three-step loop. First, you capture perfect data safely and quickly. Then you analyze that data to spot potential issues early. And finally, you act with precision, which saves you time, money, and a whole lot of headaches down the road.
So at the end of the day, what started out as maybe a cool novelty has now become an absolutely essential tool. Using drones isn't just a nice option anymore, it's pretty much a necessity.